and whatever I see is smiling at me. Love is who I am. Hello there, beloved Ascension pioneers, and welcome to this video with me today, which is a very important topic that I wish to talk about: the nature of true soul liberation in our physical ascension journey, and what I call the natural divine intelligence. There was many great masters that have been talking about this already, and one of the greatest, really most beautiful teachers that I really respect and have in high reverence as well is Mr. Jadu Krishnamurti, and we love his work, and his language and his profound eloquent expression is just truly amazing. And I will share a quote that I recently read from one of his workings. I found it on Instagram because I am a follower of that work. But I want to share that the reason why this is so important is because there are so many false beliefs and perceptions that through the human mind, which was developing, because you know the mind is ancient, is developing through ages and ages and eons of time. So it's like trying to understand why the mind has been going in this direction, or trying to understand the notions of the mind, is really pointless. It really serves no greater purpose. What we need to do is to establish the proper meditation as a foundation of living, not just a meditation where you go and you sit there for 5 minutes and you center your breathing, but the meditation that becomes your whole life. And I love the fact how Krishnamurti was describing meditation, that there is no proper way to meditate, that no one can tell you how to do it, that everybody who's mentioning that is simply talking about techniques. And techniques, as you know, are developed through the mind, and our mind is developing many, many tools, and we have much to work on that level. And yet we, as divine beings, that are human divine beings in the making, in the development of really discovering, it's like a rediscovery of who we truly are, is we exist on greater levels as well. So it's how many things we need to transcend and to surpass to really dissolve that, and to dissolve those linear tendencies. So I've made this latest Ascension update. They're always available on Facebook, on my Facebook page, Ascension Pioneers, and the blog that's called Diary of an Ascension Pioneer. They're always available there, and they're quite frequent. But I want to tell you a little bit about what this topic will be about, and it's so important. Please try considering watching the previous video I made on meditation and unity consciousness, which is more like an in-depth of the gradual layers that we're accepting and embracing of ourselves to embrace this totality. And then I also want to bring the focus to two workings. One is this great book that Krishnamurti has on soul liberation, as well as this freedom and the full liberation achievement, that, you know, everything that you're truly not. And then he has also this book we have at home. It's an old book, and it's called The Flame of Attention. And it's really beautiful because it's a very simple, very thin book, but it really brings you down to the pinpoint of what's truly important. Okay, so I want to talk about why this black and white programming that has been with us for so long simply needs to be rooted out of our experience, because the tendencies that we have as a society that's not fully developed to our divine potential is to theorize things and say, okay, this is how we act in these situations, and this is how we act in those situations, and this is how it is, black and white. Lots of dogmas, lots of beliefs, even spiritual beliefs that are just beliefs. They are nowhere truly spiritual, because the true spirituality in its divine origin is simply the natural divine intelligence, and once it's integrated and lived fully, wholeheartedly, that your whole being simply becomes this radiant essence of that divinity and the divine natural logic, which is the logic of the pulse of life, not something that you are artificially developing through your lower mental capacities that are just very, very tiny filters and layers of the existence that is so vast that we're, as humans, just starting to comprehend, right? So there's many teachers who were setting the foundations for this work, and now there's many of us here who come here as volunteer souls who embody this. We're here as pillars to show how it is when you through the solution of these false imprints, you create these beautiful dynamics of what it means to truly be a human. Because a lot of us, we say, okay, So these black and white programmings, why they're so dangerous, and the pitfalls, I'm going to be talking about that, the imprints and beliefs that become part of that, because these prevent the soul growth in its integrity and natural soul maturation. The moment we have a dogma and establishment that comes from the external, it sort of tells you how your experiences should be and what you should be choosing, right? There's a difference between certain guidelines that are universal, which I call the creation principles and universal laws. And these are simply naturally engraved in all life and creation anyway. So when you become attuned to the natural essence of life, you live through those principles because they're already a part of this ebb and flow of our life. So it's not like you're missing out on something because you're simply tuning into this unity consciousness and universal wisdom. It's a natural attunement process. The soul, when it grows, it has to be allowed the nature of experience, because once you don't allow yourself the experience, you're not going to grow. And these dogmas, these false imprints that so many exist in our society, and even the false misinterpretations, you know, of certain scriptures that are ancient scriptures, that in the first they were written very, very metaphorically because they had to be, so that each consciousness attainment of a different human being would perceive them and understand them on their level. So those who were less evolved in their consciousness, they perceive them in a very dogmatic and very linear fashion, and very much based on left, right, wrong, right, because the brain filtered. So the scriptures, you have to remember, although some of them do mirror and reflect the universal principles, they were written through men. They were written by the words of men, and they were transcribed in certain languages. Languages were created as barriers for us to have a lesser understanding of ourselves as organic beings, and these barriers then later filtered out, and we find them later, years after, when our language is no longer the same, when we have a different perception of the world and reality. And when we're tuning into these old scriptures, there's nothing wrong about it, and there's nothing wrong about the notion of tuning into, you know, things that come from way, way back, although they were also written for they were transcribed, they were written as a principle, but they were transcribed through the awareness that existed in the conscious collective at that time. But we are at a different stage, we're at a different point in our evolution. So for those of you who are embracing the path of physical ascension and conscious mastery journey, you're going to have to go beyond this, and I've talked about this many times. You're going to have to find a way to surpass all those things, because this is where your soul really comes into itself, into its wholeness, into its natural ability to be divinely intelligent from within. So it's a part of soul integrity. So your soul gets more integrity when you make choices that are going to more and more align with those universal principles. But imagine in your life, right? Sometimes this is like a trivial example. You make a few choices wrong in the first few times, and then one day you just get it right. And it feels so good because you were the one who did that. You were naturally guided to do that. And the whole realm, something might seem as something trivial or small, but the whole world shifts within you. There's like a whole new world that opens up because you went through the experience, and the experience factor is not enhanced enough in those dogmatic scriptures and beliefs that really pinpoint only this vertical understanding of God, right, as through these laws. Thou shalt not, don't do this, don't do that. We've interpreted them as these dogmatic imprints, but in truth, they were simply guidelines into what can happen when you're moving too much into these extremes. But with that following, we've missed the other extremes. So we've become so dualistic in our expression instead of learning how to unify the polarities. Because imagine you say to yourself so many times, I can't do that, I shouldn't do that, you know, I'm not supposed to do that. And naturally the propulsion of ego wants to self-fulfill through the observance of the other extreme. So you want to go in that direction. Therefore, people who are very dogmatic or very much fanatic in their beliefs, they're actually so not evolved because they're simply existing in this tiny little fractal of reality, and they're not expanding their consciousness this way. And a lot of these people are always pinpointing to others how they should live their life, and they're preaching to others, and they're saying this is how you're supposed to live, and if you don't, this will happen and that will happen. No one knows, because you have to earn your divine intelligence through a rite of passages, through what I call spirit initiations, in your own natural way. So there's a difference between soul integration. Soul integrity is learned, is applied that way through the natural application of things that simply grow into your awareness in a natural way. It's like a few times you get something, you would perceive it as wrong, but it was simply, each time, it wasn't like wrong, 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 right. It was more like, each time a different circle of your consciousness expanded out from that framework, right? Which you initially thought of and perceived, and then it expanded so much further that now it feels like, wow, what is this, right? So you're going like this with the spiral of life, unless your perception is so limited through these dogmatic beliefs, which are very much black and white, that limit your growth of the soul, limit the awareness that will eventually lead you into soul maturation and full liberation, which is physical ascension. That's what it is. So when the soul is ready, it will start a course of these spirit initiations that will lead it into physical ascension preparation. That's what I talk about, and that's the white flame and what the white flame serves. And those of us who embody the white flame, and we're embodied, we're incarnate on this path, we bring those messages, and we bring the intelligence of the white ray, which is the synthesis of all you've perceived, and now you're moving into this complete soul liberation and unity of all of yourselves. So you're ready to proceed with your divine cognizance on whole new levels of being. So the importance of experience, and I know Krishnamurti also writes a lot about that, is so vital, it's so crucial, and it applies with the aspect of us that is horizontal. And there's tendencies and very vertical approaches, you know, like the denial of the self or the denial of the senses instead of the deepening of the senses, because true consciousness that is based on the aspects of source as simply the source of light, the origin of all life that began with the great divine sound, the great Om, and then the source of all creation, which was denied in so many aspects. So when people say, well, divine feminine was suppressed, well, the aspect of creation was suppressed on a bigger scheme, right? And this liberation is the realization that you are all of it. I always say this divine trinity of life, source as simply the source of all life, which we could say the cosmic consciousness. Then we have the universal, the Christed consciousness, which is that creation that's pure in its essence, and then that which will experience itself, right? So there's many false beliefs from different scriptures, and even the one's my favorite false one, if I can call it like that, just when people say Jeshua or Jesus, the Christ, is the only Son of God. If you read some of the Kriya work, or just came to you through your natural intelligence, of course, you will understand this, that what this really meant without the metaphors is that the Christed consciousness is the only pure form that is truly of the divine nature, right? So when you exist in that, you are the Son of God, the Son, the light of God, because you exist in that Christed form. That's all that it meant. It doesn't mean that only one being is the only Son, and that Son exists in the whole vastness of consciousness, only one being that's the righteous Son of God. That doesn't make any sense, right? If you have at least a little intelligence, you will simply get that. That's how it is. But I wish to say here that in these books, right, we've only read a little bit, but it's very profound because it leads you to the state of you that already exists. You're already aware of all of this. Even the words I'm saying now, there's a part of you, an aspect of your consciousness that's fully aware of all this already. It's just that there's so many layers that we've built upon ourselves that now we have to liberate ourselves from. That was the challenge. That was the lesson. So the Flame of Attention book is good, and I love the description there about the difference between the mental focus, which is still scattered, right? You think you're being focused on something, but you're still with something else. You're not fully present with something, but you feel you have to hold this focus, and it's just a tiny mental fraction of that, versus true soul awareness, which he calls the Flame of Attention, right? I have a mastery course that's called the Mastering Divine Focus, and I talk about this specifically as well, how you master divine focus instead of that which you perceive as focus with your mind, you know. And a lot of people say the thoughts create. It's such a tiny fractal of what you perceive yourself to be, but until you do, your thoughts will create in that matter, unless you're going to expand and liberate your soul from only those very filtered, very limited levels. So I want to share this quote. It was from Instagram. It's quite short. It's from Krishnamurti, because it speaks about this directly, and it's so profound. It's like a tiny quote, but it's so strong, it's so intense that I was guided to share with all of us. Okay, I'm trying to read it as slowly as I can. I'm pretty fast, as you know. When you see the whole process, the cunning, extraordinary inventions, the intelligence of the self, how it covers itself up through identification, through virtue, through experience, through belief, through knowledge, when you see that the mind is moving in a circle, in a cage of its own making, what happens? When you are aware of it, fully cognizant of it, then are you not extraordinarily quiet state, then you will see that the mind, being utterly still, has no power of creating. Whatever the mind creates is in a circle within the field of the self. When the mind is non-creating, there is creation, which is not a recognizable process. Just sit with that for a while. I know it's quite windy here today, but I hope the transmission came through as clearly as it needed to. The whole idea, right, behind the ideologies that are fixed, that come from only a certain framework, it's not a unified consciousness. Like, example, people who do, people who are called the Bible thumpers, who always say, Jesus said that, or this said that, or you shouldn't do that. It's like, okay, who told you they said that? Is it directly coming, is it from your experience? Did you write this from the self? Where did you read it? Why are you repeating it? There's these repetitions that are leading people to live these very robotic lives. So these filters, right? So you imagine this divine deity coming, sharing their messages. Imagine how many filters were there formed between the real age of Jesus, for example, perhaps, and the age of you. You exist right now. When you look at the nature of unity consciousness, how you apply this wisdom that's natural, that's organic, is even that which was shared at that time has its circle and scope of expansion. So where you are now, that moment in time when those words were said or transcribed or created and shared, they still exist, but when the expanded field of where you are now from. So this is the only aspect of your true source creation experience where you can take that from, and that's the only nature of you accessing that naturally through organic wisdom of the self. Okay, so this is how I'm seeing it through spirit. And these false interpretations of the scriptures exist. Like I gave you this one example, like the only Son of God, right? The only Christ. Like I said, in Kriya, that's more beautifully described. And you can read that in many books, like Paramahansa Yogananda's books, or about Babaji. I shared this a lot with you because they're beautiful works. Because the Kriya is the spiritual science. It's the spirit and form as one. There's no division, no separation. There's no actually way to attain, but it's like the organic understanding of your mechanisms of the body. So it's like the mastery of the body and the mind, and through the mind, and not one over the other. Okay, so I'm gonna focus on my mind and then I'll master my body through it, or just the body without that. It's a unified perspective. It includes all the branches within your unified self. So you address all these aspects of you that exist like layers, and you're gradually shifting into your consciousness expansion through that. So I love how Krishnamurti says that meditation is not something like a technique. I always say that the same thing. I offer you always these guidelines how you can attune to greater expansion for unity, how you can unify. But in my videos, I've never given you one recipe or advice, or this is how you do it and this is how you attain it. I talk about these things as they are. But again, the experience of it for me, it's natural, and it's how I translate it. The rest I cannot share. My direct experience of Source I can never fully share. I can never fully put on paper or in words because it's so intimate. And that's that aspect of creation that was so many times was put rather into notions of scriptural repetitions, right? It gets so old and it's cyclical. And that's what basically reincarnation is. There is the recycling of soul energy. So when people talk about, oh, why is this so bad? Well, because you're not waking up from it, from this dream. Creation itself is not the illusion, but the cyclical, the reincarnated energy that's always the same and it's never real progress, that's the illusion, because you exist on many, many, many greater levels as a unified self, and the forgetfulness of that is the illusion, not the creation in itself. So there's no proper technique to meditate. You can allow yourself to experience perhaps a technique, but it has to come naturally through you. Like I received certain things that worked for me at that time, and perhaps in another time that no longer works for me. I've transcended it, or I don't need it, and I follow that organic intelligence that simply tells me it's okay. You're moving on from that, and you're not moving in a linear fashion, but you're outgrowing it and you're expanding further out from that spherical nature of spirit and in the spiral of life in unison. So these commandments, right, that also exist prevent us from that, and regulations, like people who try to regulate themselves to be better humans, to be a better person. I shouldn't do that, I shouldn't do this, and then they try to be very robotic in the application of perhaps in relationships. Someone says this to me, in these teachings I read you have to be like this way, and you're almost like your response gets so robotic to that. You don't seek in the intelligence that tells you in each moment the answer will vary. The variables of life are always shifting, and that's what creation teaches you. The primordial life force teaches you, and that's how your soul really develops and it grows through the integrity that it develops through that evolution. And we talk about evolution, but there is no evolution in the recycling of energy. There's lots of souls who we say they're evolving, but it's almost like they're static, right? For a while they're choosing this static journey. So commandments are like false external self-regulations that exist to prevent experience, which is natural and organic to us. And in my videos, in my work of Ascension as in the physical experience, the beauty of creation, the understanding of all life and the unification with all life is that natural way. And so many souls have forgotten that, and it's a shame. And there's beautiful beings who are teaching about this liberation, to liberate yourself. It's not about, people who've been writing these things, like even in the works of old scriptures, like the sins, or many different ascetic cultures that denied themselves. They wanted to deny the senses to go vertical, right? Perhaps for that time that felt good to them, and that was a part of their soul evolution. But that's not yet the whole answer. That's not the existence of life. Life in itself is love. And without love, you can have all the intelligence that you perceive through the mind, but without love, there is no application. There will be no integration. Love, I've always shared this with you, is that which integrates that understanding into the physical perception. And that's a true sensuality. Is the sensuality comes through love. Without love, there is no intelligence. Everything just exists vertically. So nature, creation is beauty. Even in this book, The Flame of Attention, Krishnamurti writes about this, and he gives this example of the sins who were so focused when they met them, right, in this group in Himalayas. They were so focused in these teachings that we're all discussing these things. They've missed out on life, nature happening around them. They've denied that aspect at that time. And this vertical path only truly is a path of creating a disconnect from the source and the aspect of source that is creation and the primordial life force. I've written this just now before making the video about soul maturity, and I want to read it to you, and then I want to finish up before this gets too windy or too long, too freakishly long. Soul maturity is the learning of self-awareness through conscious flame of attention, so that we learn to exist naturally through our Christed pure divinity, and learn to regulate all life situations through a natural intelligence, which is self-aware, spontaneous, joyful, full of life, which is always evolving within itself. So therefore, it's not self-contained in terms of locked in. It is not applicable in the same notions. It's interchangeable and non-linear. It's multifaceted, multidimensional, and exists in unity with the great spiral of all life, the great pulse of life, the divine intelligence. Remember your natural origin, because that's how life should be. That's how life was meant to be in its prime creation, before all those distortions and false imprints came. So we have to consider all that takes us away as well. This is the part of accessing and addressing this, and where we're still indoctrinated, right? Through others and external means, or through ourselves. Something that we create constantly is this pressure upon ourselves. Like the notions we can't be free, right? Anything that takes us away, or everything from this natural intelligence, this not mind-based intelligence, but organic, causes the disconnect from the aspect of God's source that is creation. So the God is source of all creation, the great life force, many times called the Holy Spirit, the Great Spirit. The Kundalini Shakti runs through us, and by engaging with that principle, we start to engage with life. So it's the mind, body, soul, all mastery as one, as a unified. It's not like you're just mastering yourself just through meditation. A lot of people do that, and again, it's a vertical path. They forget to tend to the body. Some people get only into the body. They forget about this higher aspect within this light that we are. So you can take my Tantrika course for assistance through the soul liberation. This is my most profound course. You have Life Force Mastery and Galactic Pulse of Life Mastery there. There's a 6.5 hours, my longest course so far, and the most affordable in terms of how much there is in terms of material. So there's 2 videos. And recently I received a beautiful feedback from the soul who's really started doing the application through the exercises and to attune to the great life force, and they share with me that I've already experienced tremendous changes in how they see life and sparkles and this bliss of that connection with life force that's coming through. And you can read that if you want to know more. There's some feedback shared on the link below, which is directly leading you to my mastery courses, workshops. They exist on YouTube. Some people don't always understand, but please understand these are several gigabytes videos. They're huge videos, and they cannot be shared via downloads. They cannot be downloaded directly on your computer. So they are how I manage this access is they're always available. They're always there, but they're on YouTube, and they're private video courses to which I have to manually add you. And sometimes people don't read the inscriptions and the descriptions on my page, and they get confused and they send me these confused messages. But please read, right? Everything you always do it with the attention, with that flame of attention. Don't be too scattered and these things. So sometimes people write me things and then they blame me, but it's actually they who didn't read what's there, and I can't do anything about it. I can't be attentive for others. I can only do my work and be responsible for myself and what I put out there. And I advise you to really start noticing yourself, because a lot of times I see still in this communication we kind of act, right? We act out with each other. It's still so unconscious, you know. Recently someone asked me, right, someone if we're to meet, right, and it's taken them so long for us to meet, and then at the end I no longer felt it. I just didn't feel it anymore, and I said, I'm sorry, I'm no longer guided to meet you. I said, I hope you understand. I didn't feel any need to explain, right? And that person goes like, okay, thank you for honesty, but I really don't get it. And I said, well, it's the mind. You see, the mind consciously has to rationalize. And I simply said to that person that, you know, if we were on that same length, that wavelength, which is pure resonance, that vibratory intelligence that's natural, organic, it already tells you from the bottom of the heart. But I see that a lot of people are not really paying attention to the heart, that intelligence, which is the intelligence of the cosmic pulse of life, the cosmic heart of the universe, beyond. And that people don't understand is because they don't connect to that aspect through themselves. Through this intelligence, we can feel, we're cosmically empathic. I can feel always what others are feeling, and they don't have to explain things to me. I just feel it. I know. And people go like, how do you know? Well, I know. It's because I come from this awareness and this embodiment of this cosmic heart. And it's a lot of people who don't pay attention to their hearts, and then they want understanding, and they want solutions, and they're like, please explain this to me. And you can't. How can you explain where you're coming from to another? Because when you think of it, right, your experience with someone or something you have, it's so intimate, it's so personal, that even if you explain, that only perhaps covers 1%. That's still not the whole. If we were truly intelligent, we would allow each other to have an intimate experience, even if it is through another. Right? The Two of Cups aspect in tarot. We're unified, and still, what I feel is not perhaps directly how you feel, but still translate through our own divine intelligence in our own way. It's very unique. So, two people who are aware with each other will filter through and understand each other. They won't have to have reasoning behind. They will simply feel, and they'll be in that resonance field. There's also something else that came through that wisdom when I was sharing with that person, is because many times in the past I had issues with telling people no. I was like, oh, I'm afraid I'm going to offend them, or, you know, and I was observing this part of me that felt so uncomfortable when I had to say no to someone. I always tried to make it like I have a reason behind it, but there's not always a reason that's intellectual for what we feel. People will want validation and reason. Okay, tell me why is this, so I can improve myself. But there's nothing to improve. It's just how you feel in the moment. It's your choice, and it's so sacred to you. So people forget about this, that's what it means to be truly liberated. You don't form your decisions based on the reactions of others. And I've been tuning into more this aspect of me that's more naturally regulated without these notions of how my actions or words should come out. And that really liberates us from within. And when we do, and I spoke honestly and truthfully, that person responded really well. They actually said, when I always thought in initial stages of me being, human and embracing these human ways in communication, I used to be like, I wanted to share everything in my heart and pour my heart out at once. And sometimes what that causes is the restriction on the other part, because the other human, the other being is not always where we are. And sometimes we give too much or we share too much, and it's like we're washed over with everything. So what I do now, with more of the self-focused mastery, and again, I wish to remind you that there is, again, we can lead into these extremes by saying it's all about myself realization. Then you forget about the others, forget about the compassionate attunement and interdependency with all life. So and Krishnamurti talks about this as well, you become so obsessed with your self-attainment and realization that you forget about others. That's not what true for me divine realization is about. There's this compassionate service to all life. That's when you're truly enlightened, right? So when you do observe that, it's not like, oh, it's my right to feel this way, right? And you forget about the other. You have to be truthful for you and for them as well, because you're one, right? You exist from the same source. So when a lot of people try to avoid things because they say, oh, it's all about me, right? It all comes from me. Yes, it is all about the responsibilities for our choices that are built from within, created from within ourselves. But in no way should we think we're isolated and our choices then don't have an impact on others. It's simply being truthful, not just in your vertical way, right? When you're honest to yourself, when you're in this self-discernment, but also you know how to pass it on in a horizontal way. And with others, then you're truly enlightened. And I always call this the vertical meets the horizontal enlightenment. And I talk about this in my Cosmic Beloved video, which is a way how to integrate your soul through these this cosmic union. And when I use the word cosmic, the cosmic consciousness is that which exists beyond the creation aspect, which is this Christed universal consciousness. That cosmic is simply that aspect, which the source, which is beyond creation itself, right? We can tune into that. We have to be aware of what it is, right? We have to allow ourselves to be naturally guided into that attunement, right? So we are responsible for the self and for what we put out and for the energy we reverberate outwardly. And that's the true wisdom that's natural, that's organic, that's not scriptural, it's not preachy, it's not governed by the laws of black and white, right and wrong. It's simply in each moment you will have to apply yourself differently. And you do it in circles, right? So I gave you this example of sometimes you put everything out and it kind of comes back into you and it gives you a slap because you haven't learned to master, okay, I'm going to share myself this much and how I feel. So I've learned in my human embodiment to give as much as I feel in the moment, and depending on the outcome, right, the feedback I get from the other, I see how much I can expand and further emphasize what I've shared with them, right? And then it keeps on expanding, and when the person stops there at a certain point, I stop and then I withdraw. And you can see how you can deepen intimacy, and not with everyone you can do that because it depends on their own development and their own natural expression. So you see what I've shared in the first part of the video is about us getting this and having this inner alignment that's vertical, and this part I'm talking about now is how we apply it in our conscious relationships, because that's what we're here for. We're here to love, to inter-exchange with each other, to have mutual reception, to love one another. And it's not always met. Your love and how much you love will not always be met through another. So see how far out you can expand. With yourself, you can go to the infinite, right? But with someone else, perhaps you won't be able to do so. So if you're too much explaining something and they're not there to get that, they're actually not going to get you. And you say, well, it didn't get me, I'm disappointed. Well, don't be, because they're not meant to get you. You're meant to test out your limitless expression and how much you can go beyond these limits, and at the same time how much you have to have those boundaries in certain frameworks. And that's natural intelligence, and that's learning natural application, and that's how your soul will grow in integrity rather than be limited to the scope of in these reactions or these cases I have to act this way and then this way. These can only be guidelines, but then your sovereign nature will come through the natural expression of how this application within yourself will be expanding, right? With each time, with each situation, you're going to blossom further. And I've noticed this, and all my knowledge that I already had and it came with my soul awareness, but as a human I needed to master this. And in many times it was like, why did I do like this? Why was I like this? Oh, I know better, right? Every time I was like, I know better. But eventually, there was an experience where something clicked, and I really physically embodied that which I knew to be true. That's the whole reason for Earth Mastery, and for us to be not just these vertical beings, but beautifully enlightened horizontal beings of divine love in action, love in action, love in physical form. So that's it for today. Expand yourself gradually. Breathe in with the pulse of life. Consider taking the Tantric course because, yeah, it's amazing. And if you're going to do your input and your work, I'm sure you're going to have profound results, and you can read feedback on my page. So now my nose is getting a little from all the wind and all the talking. So I'll leave you with that for today. I'm going to take some time off. My body's kind of tired, and I got a little sick just recently, so it's body's wisdom telling slow down, ebb and flow. It's time to integrate and go deeper within our own experience, because you know, you can have all the wisdom, and sometimes I have this propulsion, I have so much to share. I would just sit here and talk all day and share and record, but my body also needs to be physically present with my own experience, and sometimes it's too much, and the body will tell me, gives me like a slap, like slow down. And you see, that's the wisdom that comes from the understanding of self-observance and self-maintenance rather than self-control. The true self-control can never be in a way that's limiting to you, to your being, because the joy aspect will be denied in that. So I hope these understandings and sharings on the sacred path of physical ascension and soul liberation help you and assist your beautiful journey. If you have any feedback to share with me, you always know where to find me. My email is available. It's all in the link. You can check the YouTube for info section where all my links are as well, although they're always down below. I wish you a beautiful time. I'll talk to you again soon when I have something new prepared, and we don't know when that is because we're natural beings, right? We are spontaneous, beautiful, and magical. I love you so much with love, beauty, and power as always. And so much grace. Welcome into my world, the world of the elven song, magical.